Let's begin with a question. Not the kind you answer with a shrug, but the kind that settles in your chest like a stone dropped into still water. What if loving your country isn't automatic? Not because you're broken, not because you're ungrateful, but because something deeper, something truer is demanding to be heard. You've seen the flags, the anthems, the chest-thumping declarations on social media every national holiday. The performative pride that flares like fireworks and fades just as quickly. And maybe, just maybe, you've sat there silent while others cheered and felt nothing. Or worse, you felt guilt, confusion, a quiet, unsettling disconnect, like trying to hum a tune you were told you should know by heart, but never actually learned. This isn't about rebellion. It's not about cynicism for its own sake. This is about honesty. The raw, unvarnished truth is this: millions of people, not outliers, not extremists, not traitors, live every day without the warm, unquestioning glow of patriotism. They may serve in hospitals, teach in schools, build infrastructure, raise children, pay taxes, vote, protest, mourn, and strive, and yet when the national anthem plays, their hand doesn't instinctively rise to their heart. When the flag waves, their pulse doesn't quicken. And when someone demands they love it or leave it, they don't flinch, not out of defiance but out of exhaustion. Because they've already asked the harder question: what exactly am I supposed to love? And that question? That's where the real story begins. Because the absence of patriotism isn't a void. It's a space, a sacred, fiercely guarded space where critical thought, moral clarity, and personal history converge. For some, it's born from generational trauma. Descendants of enslaved people asked to revere a symbol that once sanctioned their dehumanization. Indigenous voices raised on stolen land, hearing "land of the free" echo across burial grounds. Immigrants who fled violence only to be told their gratitude must be loud and unquestioning, or else they are not truly one of us. For others, it's disillusionment forged in real time, watching democracy crack under the weight of corruption, seeing promises of justice erode into systemic bias, living through wars sold as noble, only to learn decades later how many lies were wrapped in red, white, and blue, or whatever colors your flag bears. Patriotism in those moments doesn't feel like pride, it feels like complicity. Let me tell you about Elena. Elena grew up in a small town where school assemblies began with the Pledge of Allegiance, facing a portrait of a founding father who owned people just like her ancestors. She memorized dates, battles, speeches, every patriotic checkbox ticked. But inside, a growing dissonance. Not anger, just misalignment. Like wearing shoes 2 sizes too small bearable for a while, until every step leaves a bruise. Then came college. A history seminar. A footnote in a primary source. The treaty was signed under duress. The chief was held at gunpoint while his village burned. Elena read it 3 times. Then she went to the library, chasing citations like breadcrumbs leading out of a fairy tale and into a forest far darker. That was the first fracture. The second came years later, when her cousin, a black man, unarmed compliant, was stopped by police. The dashcam footage surfaced. The department issued a statement. At the community meeting afterward, a city councilman stood and said, "We must remember how far we've come. We must not let isolated incidents define who we are." Elena didn't clap. She just sat there, listening to the applause rise around her like a tide, and realized this is the moment patriotism demands silence. This is the moment it asks you to look away, to prioritize the idea of unity over the reality of harm. That's when she understood patriotism, as commonly practiced, isn't love. It's loyalty with conditions. Loyalty that insists you celebrate the whole, even when parts of it are rotting. Loyalty that mistakes critique for betrayal. And here is what no one tells you. Choosing not to perform patriotism doesn't mean you've stopped caring. In fact, it often means you care too much to lie. Would you call a friend disloyal for pointing out their abusive partner? Would you accuse a doctor of hating the body because she diagnoses cancer? Then why do we pathologize citizens who name injustice not to destroy but to heal? There's a powerful, quiet revolution happening not in the streets, but in living rooms, classrooms, and late-night texts between friends who finally whisper, "Me too." I don't feel it either. This isn't apathy. Apathy is scrolling past bad news and thinking meh. What we're describing is engaged detachment, a deliberate refusal to confuse symbols with substance. It's the veteran who served 2 tours and now questions the mission, not out of regret, but out of responsibility. It is the teacher who displays the flag and teaches her students about the internment of Japanese Americans, because reverence without reckoning is idolatry. Neuroscience backs this up. Studies show that blind patriotism activates reward centers in the brain similar to addiction. It feels good to belong. But constructive patriotism lights up regions associated with empathy, moral reasoning, and cognitive flexibility. One soothes. The other seeks. One says, "We're great." The other asks, "How can we be better?" And here is the uncomfortable twist. The people who don't feel patriotic are often the ones holding the country's conscience. They're the whistleblowers, the grassroots organizers, the journalists digging where others turn away. They don't fly flags on their porches, but they show up at food banks on holidays. Their patriotism isn't performative. It's provisional, granted only when the country lives up to its stated ideals, and revoked not with rage, but with sorrow when it doesn't. But let's address the elephant in the room. What about gratitude? Aren't they ungrateful for the freedoms, the opportunities, the safety net? The gratitude trap. Because gratitude, like love, must be authentic, not coerced. The demand for performative gratitude is often a tool of control. It's used to silence dissent, to shame the marginalized, to deflect accountability. Real gratitude doesn't require denial. You can mourn the loss of indigenous languages and be grateful for modern medicine. You can rage against mass incarceration and appreciate public libraries. Complexity isn't betrayal. It's maturity, which brings us to the climax. Imagine 2 people at a river. One sees the sparkling water and says, "This river is perfect." To question it is to insult the source. They build a shrine and sing hymns to its beauty, ignoring the chemical runoff upstream. The other kneels, cups the water, tastes it, and spits it out. It's contaminated, they say. But it doesn't have to be. The source is pure. The problem is what we've added. They don't curse the river. They study it. They organize cleanups. They lobby for regulation. Who loves the river more? Patriotism, at its healthiest, isn't blind devotion to the river as it is. It's fierce, relentless commitment to the river as it could be. And that is the raw truth. People who don't feel patriotic aren't abandoning their country. They're refusing to abandon hope for it. They're the ones who still believe change is possible, precisely because they haven't settled for the myth. They haven't traded truth for comfort. But there's a hidden cost. To live without patriotic reflexes is to walk through life with an invisible target on your back. You're called un-American. You're accused of giving ammunition to the enemy. You're shunned at family dinners. And yet they persist. Not because they're angry, but because they remember what the country promised. They remember the dream. Here we build something better. That dream isn't dead. It's just under construction. And the people who don't feel patriotic? They're not the wrecking crew. They're the architects. So now I turn it back to you. When you hear the anthem, what rises in your chest? Pride? Nostalgia? Dread? Ambivalence? Nothing? Don't dismiss it. Investigate it. Because that feeling, whatever it is data. It's your moral compass recalibrating. And if you recognized yourself in this story, if you've ever stayed quiet while others cheered, if you've ever loved your neighbors more than your national symbols, know this: you are not alone. You are not broken. You are awake. And the world needs people who are awake. So what do you do now? First, give yourself permission. Permission to feel complex. Permission to dissent. Second, find your people. The ones who don't demand flag pins but ask thoughtful questions. Third, act not out of rage but out of reclamation. Mentor a kid. Support independent journalism. Learn the real history. Vote not just in big elections, but in school board meetings and local referendums. This isn't the end of patriotism. It's its evolution, and you? You're on the front lines, not of a culture war, but of a conscience movement. The raw truth? The people who dawn to feel patriotic might just be the ones who love their country the most, because they refuse to let it settle for less than it promised to be. If this resonated with you, if it put words to a feeling you carried but never named, smash that like button as an act of solidarity. Let the algorithm know there's an audience for honesty. Subscribe, because this is just the beginning. In the next episode, we'll dive into the unsung stories of everyday people rebuilding democracy from the ground up. Hit the bell, because what comes next might just reignite your faith, not in flags, but in people. Thank you for questioning, for staying. The truth is raw, but it's also yours. And that changes everything.